Hi everyone again. Thank you for joining. My name is Kelly Gordeau. I work with AMGC and Director of Corporate Affairs here. Thank you again for joining us to AMGC's webinar series, 10 Ways to Succeed in Australian Manufacturing. Today is focused on Way 7th. This is our 7th week, and this week's topic is access to capital. We will now pass you over to our host, Michael Sharp, or Sharpie as he is known. He's our National Director for Industry. Thank you, Sharpie. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Kelly. It's great to be here again. I'm glad you could all join us, and what a day it is. We won't ask a poll today. There seems to be a bigger poll on, so for the benefit of those watching this recording at a later time, as we speak, the US election is underway. The polls are closing. And so very shortly, we will find out who the next president of the United States will be. So it's a big day in that regard. But again, glad you could join us. I'd like to kick off with an acknowledgement to country. And in the spirit of reconciliation, the AMGC acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. You'll notice that I'm not in the mobile Zoom studio, but today I'm coming to you from Darkinjung country on the central coast of New South Wales. Today we're talking about access to capital, and we've got a great range of speakers, and I'm glad you could all join us as our panellists. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a bit of a wave as I introduce you. First, we have Alexandra Horden, and Alexandra is the Director for Australia's Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman. And with a background in law and strong family ties to small business, Alexandra's career spans across both the private and public sectors that intersect with small business. Alexandra's worked in industry bodies and private businesses, advocating to the government. So we're going to touch on some of the work that's underway with the Ombudsman and look forward to learning a bit more. Welcome, Alexandra. And secondly, Adam Gilmour. Adam is the CEO and co-founder of Gilmour Space Technologies. We've got an AMGC project underway with Gilmour Space Technologies at the moment, and I'm sure we'll touch on that. But Gilmour Space is a venture-funded rocket company in Queensland, and they're developing more affordable launch vehicles for small satellite and payload customers. Adam's been a lifelong space fan and believes that rockets can be made smaller, cheaper, faster, and that the new space industry and Australia would benefit greatly from having more dedicated access to space. So there's a lot of work going on, and as we know, the new Australian Space Agency is really underway as well. So glad you could join us, Adam. Michael Resnikoff is the Associate Director for SMEs in New South Wales and ACT at Export Finance Australia. And during this current crisis, it's certainly shrunk the world, and this morning, Michael's joining us from Germany, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning over there. So Mike, I'm sure we'll touch a bit on that, but I'm glad you could join us in the early hours, and we certainly look forward to learning more about the ongoing work at Export Finance Australia. Great to have my colleague, Mark Peters, joining me today. Mark's our State Director for Queensland and the Northern Territory. He's also our National Director for Projects. So I know that many of you have been working with Mark on our AMGC project initiatives. And there's more to come on that. So glad you could all join us, a great panel, and happy to take your questions throughout. Remember that at the bottom of the screen is the Q&A button. So feel free to post any questions there and I'll ask our panelists throughout. A bit of housekeeping, remind you all that today's webinar is being recorded, and tomorrow you'll be able to watch that back on the YouTube channel. So share that widely. The session will go for an hour. The report, which is our 10 Ways report, can be downloaded for free on the AMGC website. And I know that many of you have been doing that, and feel free at any time to pick up the phone and ask me any questions. Happy to support you in any way that we can. Now the report, the research side, and as you know, many of you spoke with our Director for Research, Katie O'Connell, as we went around the country and engaging with companies big and small. We had more than 30 focus groups and roundtable discussions and interviews all over Australia. 93 individuals from manufacturing companies, industry bodies, government agencies, and our great universities. These industry bodies represented approximately 370 manufacturers right across the country. We also did a survey of 1,000 members of the Australian public and a survey of 1,000 students and other focus groups. So very broad research. Today, Way 7, access to capital. Here's a few points just at a glance. Access to capital is a perennial problem for smaller businesses and particularly for manufacturers looking to invest in advanced technology. Preparing loan applications and financial modelling and navigating grant processes requires different skills than those used for day-to-day running of a manufacturing business. But companies can take practical steps to increase their chances of securing funding and gain an advantage by learning to navigate complex government grants. And I think on that, I'm going to throw to Adam because Gilmour Space Technologies have been doing great things and raising capital. The company is growing fast, but you might just give us a bit of experience around a couple of those points, Adam, if you don't mind. I guess one is, preparing or updating your business plan. And in the report, we state that investors need to see that you have a clear plan going forward and will use your history to evaluate the likelihood of future success. What's your experience around that?
Sure, Sharpie. I think when you're raising money from investors, they're very interested in not only a technology plan, but a financial plan as well. And they want to see that you've mapped out what your expected costs are across a whole lot of variables, but generally they're looking at like headcount, capital expenditure, any new machines you need to buy, etc. So it's important that you get a good handle on that. And if you've been tracking it for a while, they really like to see, say, the last 12 months of what you've been doing and then your next 2 years of a forecast to say, okay, you know what you're doing. If you've been keeping track of these major items, that's good. They definitely like to see, precise financial management. I think that's important. I think the other thing that's very important is when you're raising money, you've got to look at what kind of milestones can you do in the next 1 to 2 years. So traditionally, venture capital will give you anywhere between 18 months and 2 years of what they call runway. And that's cash that you will have until you run out of cash. And it's really important that you make sure that you've got a number of milestones that you can achieve within those 2 years and give yourself a buffer. Don't have all your milestones in 2 years. You are very likely not to hit those milestones in 2 years. The milestones can be a number of different things. So for example, it could be customers that you get on board in your company. And you've got to say, how valuable could these be in the long run? Any revenue that you get is fantastic. Investors love to see revenue and they love to see increasing revenue. And then if you don't have a lot of revenue or you haven't got a lot of customers yet and you're doing deep technology, then they look at what your TRL is, technology readiness level.
Yep. And
they want to see that you move it significantly in the 2 years that give you the money. So, for my company, that was like rocket engine tests and, some of the other major components we had to make sure we did within the timelines. Then the other thing that's fantastic is if you can get grants. So there's a whole lot of different grants that you can get in manufacturing. There's more coming. There's an MMI that's coming out that's going to put $1.3 billion into the industry, but it's going to be over 4 years. So I'm not holding my breath for that.
Certainly everyone is talking about manufacturing, which is just fantastic. What a big year it's been in so many ways, but to see manufacturing coming to the fore is just terrific.
Oh, I think it's great. And I think it's there's a lot of due diligence behind that. I know AMGC's done a lot of work with the federal government to get that grant done. So it's good that your hard work's been done. But getting a grant is good because getting a grant is not easy. You go through a lot of due diligence. If I look at the AMGC grant, it took many months to get the grant. We had to, go through a lot of questions and give a lot of plans. But once we got the grant, it's an endorsement. So investors are looking for endorsements. They're either looking for endorsements from customers or from funders like grant bodies. So I like to have a combination of a whole lot of things. If I go to an investor and I'm trying to raise money and I've got some customers, I've pushed my TRL forward, I've got some grants, it's a good overall story to get. And you just got to make sure that whatever you're asking for, if you're asking for $5 million or $10 million, and you think that's going to last you 2 years because you've done all your financials, you've got to make sure you can move the company forward significantly in those 2 years so that as you're coming towards the end of it, investors can see, oh, you've managed the money well, you've achieved a lot, you're going to keep growing. So I think those are the things that people should be focused on if they're looking to raise investor money.
Yeah, now for everyone out there, this doesn't have to be too difficult. There's support mechanisms out there too. But on that point around preparing and updating the business plan, Adam, could you just give us a few more pointers on that? And, I guess the company accountant can be helpful, but there's programs like the Entrepreneurs Program that can support business planning and things like that. How's Gilmour's gone around as far as the evolving business plan? Because I know the company's growing fast, and Adam can only join us for 30 minutes today because he's very busy building rockets, and everyone's wanting a piece of his action at the moment. So, but on that point, for our members out there, the business planning side of it doesn't have to be too complex, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's just generally about a strategy. If you look at my investor pitch deck, the first part is about the market. How big is the market? The second part is, what's the opportunity that our company can get involved in? The third part of our deck is about our technology. The fourth part of the deck is about our financials. How much have we spent so far? What did we get done? What do we think we've got ahead to spend? And then the fifth part is the team. So investors are very interested in the team as well. If you've got a good team that's executing your plan, that's important. So those are the 5 main points.
Yep.
You could have 1 or 2 or 3 slides on each of those points and do a pretty good job. I normally have about 2 slides of financials on mine.
Okay. I mean, there's a good point here in our report. It says the bank is not set up to help manufacturers as they do not understand the business and what is needed. And that came from one of our members in South Australia. But that's pretty fair. The bank's busy doing their thing. So to get concise information about a business, it's important to have that planning and be succinct in what you're trying to put across too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an ex-banker, but I'm not in a position to get financing now. But if I put my banker hat on, I think what banks are interested in is cash flow and any kind of security they can get. Like, if you've got machines that you can use as a deposit or something like that to get funding, that's important. I think a combination of cash flow and anything you can use as security to get early financing. But my company, we haven't been able to get any bank financing because we're reasonably high risk, so we're predominantly just using venture capital.
Yep. Okay, and I'm sure Mike will give us a bit of examples around Export Finance Australia and having a business plan and how that can help. We'll get to that shortly. But mate, just tell us a bit more about Gilmour Space and some of the latest work you're doing. And here we were talking about the US presidential election. We do have the new Space Force in the US. And Australia as a nation, we're now a signatory to the NASA Moon to Mars mission. And I know you're involved with talks with all that. So what's going on?
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. I think there's a lot of programs that come attached to that NASA Moon Mars mission. There's $150 million in the program. The Space Agency just announced yesterday a little bit of money towards looking at business plans or cases or technology cases to get the next round of money, which is there's a Pathfinder mission or it leads to a trailblazer, but it's got about $50 million and they're going to pick about 4 projects, roughly $10 million each. They want to be collaborative. So even a small SME that wants to get involved in space can participate in that. I mean, they're telling the bigger space companies like us, you have to collaborate. So we're out actively looking at people that we can collaborate with for some of these bigger missions. And then it finalizes in 2023, 2024 in what's called a Trailblazer. And that's a $50 million program that'll take something definitely into space, but probably on or around the orbit of the moon. So that's going to be fantastic. If I have to guess, it's going to be a rover with a lander or something like that. That's what the agency seems to be really looking at.
Okay. So great opportunities for Australian industry in general. And so if you're not currently involved with the space sector, but you'd like to learn more, certainly have a look at the Space Agency's website. I recommend you look at the Facebook page for Gilmour's. They're doing great stuff on social media as well. But here you've heard it today that Gilmour Space Technologies are looking to build those local supply chains. So feel free to reach out to us at AMGC, and if you would like a connection, we can certainly help facilitate that.
Great.
That's great, mate. And are we going to be space tourists in our lifetime?
I think so. I mean, what human space flight's on our technology roadmap, it's around 2030 or beyond, but I think, there's more and more countries in the world that are looking at space and looking at rockets and looking at human space flight. And, I think we're definitely going to be doing that. So I'm very focused on that. I started the company to fly humans to space. Satellites are a on the way thing.
Okay. Well, it is an exciting time. It feels like we live in a time where if you can think about it, you can actually make it happen. So it's a good time to be alive. Mark, we just spoke with Adam about the projects side of things, and you've been vitally important in putting the AMC projects together. But could you tell the people out there about what the government grants are looking for, and maybe some work around the guidelines and how they can go about that?
Yes, well, that's a good question, Mike, Sharpie, because they've just announced in the budget another round of the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, and that's $50 million worth. They're currently looking at the guidelines for that. If it's anything like the previous one, you're looking at capital equipment can be purchased. And the main thrust of the previous one was transformation of your manufacturing processes. So we're looking for things like robotics and automation, advanced materials and composites, recycling, digital design and rapid prototyping, sustainable engineering and life cycle management, additive manufacturing, sensors and data analytics, materials and repair, biomanufacturing and biological integration, nanomanufacturing. So all of these augmented reality and virtual reality systems, all of these advanced manufacturing technologies which will transform your manufacturing process to make you more globally competitive. And that's the basic remit of AMGC. We want Australian manufacturers to be more globally competitive so that we can replace imports, or we can basically start exporting to overseas, America and Europe in particular, and Southeast Asia too.
Now, so, mate, when I look at our report here, one of the other quotes from one of our Western Australian manufacturers says, sometimes the grant application process feels like wading through setting concrete. And I'm sure that's familiar to a lot of you out there, but Mark's very much involved in the AMGC projects, and you've got experience around the Entrepreneurs Program application process as well. I'm sure there's ways that things can be simplified, but there are supports out there for people to engage with if they're not too familiar with the grant writing process. But on one of the points, if we're looking for the customer outcome, what sort of points are we looking for there? What should people focus on?
In terms of their project application?
Yeah, I guess things like what's the market and that sort of stuff, right?
That's right. You've got to have a customer outlook. Is there a market for your product?
Yep.
Can you get an MOU, a letter of support or letter of interest from a customer? That will help your project application. Have you done your market research? If I'm going to do a project with somebody, I want to make sure they've got something they can sell, and they've done their market research to ensure that case does occur. I did that with Adam, with his project. I said, okay, what's your market? And he just gave me a long story about this is where we see our market, the people I think we will be launching for, et cetera, et cetera. So I always look for a customer outcome for any project application. And it applies to not only the AMGC funds, but also MMF. They want to know about that as well, Manufacturing Modernisation Fund. Any other government, there's a degree of commercialisation which that market research is very important for.
And on that, Adam, if you're talking about the market that you're trying to approach, I guess for a company like Gilmour's, you're not just the space agency or defence, there's farming and ag tech technology that these satellites can perform for as well, right? So it's a broad market, I guess. But one of the things we've got in the report is about being patient, and that applying for a grant can be a time-consuming and frustrating process. But what I often say to our members is keep applying for those grants. One, you'll learn more about how to craft a grant application more. And also it goes the other way. The more that you put submissions in, the people that are receiving those submissions get used to seeing your business front and center, and there's support mechanisms that people will want to reach out and help your company to apply for grants. So I guess having some sort of rolling grant application process would be important?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we definitely have that as a philosophy. We just hired someone to just focus predominantly, and she started today, on writing grant applications and technical documents for us. I think the other thing, I should have said this before, the questions that, say, Mark Peters asked me when I'm going for the AMGC grant are very similar to investors. So, you know, it's good training and a good process training to go through something like an AMGC process before you go and talk to investors, because a lot of the questions and the process of getting information is very similar.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's good feedback. And it's, I always say it's good to be as precise, and, you know, the milestones around projects, you know, work out, are those milestones realistic? That's important. And I know, Mark, you're very thorough on that side of things, but that's part of putting the plan together, right?
Pretty much a bad cop when it comes to the initial project application, and ask some very daunting and difficult questions and probing questions. But then I become a good cop by writing the project application up for the client, and then trying to get my board to approve it. So that's really where I sort of change hats. Once, you know, I start off, you know, I've got to be a little bit reserved and sort of not enthusiastic, and I just want to make sure I get the honest truth, and I can judge the person's integrity and all that sort of thing. And that also goes to the ongoing process of the milestone acquittals. You can judge their integrity, and you can get that trust growing with them as you work through that project.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, Adam, I'd really like to thank you for joining us. I know you've got a lot on today, so thank you for taking the time to talk with our members all around the country. And if there's any questions out there, feel free to forward to me, and I'll be in touch with Adam on a regular basis. So again, mate, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I just echo what you said. If there's anybody that thinks they can contribute technology or manufacturing to the space industry, happy to reach out to you guys, to me, or straight to us. And we're connected with the industry as well. If you can't help us and there's someone else you can help, we'll connect you.
Yeah, it's all about collaboration. Thanks again, mate.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Yeah. And Alexandra, that was important, some of the stuff that Adam was mentioning. And could you give us a bit of an overview of what the Ombudsman's role is and some of the programs that you're involved with?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, all of that stuff Adam was talking about is so important for small businesses. So our office, it's a bit of a mouthful, the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, is a government agency. It's a statutory authority, so set up by the federal government with a dual role to assist and advocate for small business. So we are set up under a piece of legislation. Our inaugural Ombudsman is Kate Carnell, who I'm sure a lot of you have either met or heard of. And our legislation gives us those two functions, the assistance and the advocacy. Assistance is what it says on the tin, basically. So our assistance team, they're all small business people. They've either owned small businesses or are currently running small businesses, and they help small businesses that may be in dispute with another entity. So it may be a payment dispute with another business. It might be a dispute over your tax bill with the tax office. We get a lot of tax problems actually through to our office. That might be a surprise. Sometimes it's about, you know, having a dispute with the bank over whether or not you can open a bank account. So our assistance team helps businesses through those disputes. They don't provide legal advice, but they will usually help you try and either resolve the disputes yourselves or perhaps move on to mediation and see if you can maintain the relationship and stay out of the courts, which is really important.
So you must have a lot of information on the website.
We've got a heap of information on the website, so it's aspefio.gov.au. Jump on and have a quick look at it, and I'm sure the team will pop it up on the recording. And we've got a whole lot of information about how you might manage a dispute and about all of the other pieces of work we do. So the advocacy function, whereas assistance does one-to-one business disputes, the advocacy function does systemic issues that affect small businesses. So if we have for example, when we have a lot of complaints coming through the assistance function about a particular tax item, the advocacy team will look at how we can fix that thing to stop it happening to all of the businesses. And so a lot of our focus is on insurance, access to capital, access to justice. So an easy way to, you know, get an outcome rather than having to go through the courts. We look at the R&D tax incentive. We're currently doing a piece of work on the personal property security register. So it's pretty wide ranging.
Okay. But with the business background across the organisation, I think that's important. You know, we've got 47,000 manufacturing companies all across Australia, and the majority of them would be SMEs. So they're very busy running their business and doing their day-to-day needs. But the services that you're describing, is there a fee associated with them?
So there's not a fee for the initial assistance work. So as a government funded agency, all of the advocacy work is done, you know, on the government funding. With the assistance function, if it gets to the point where the parties agree they need to go to mediation, we don't offer that service in-house. So we outsource to a list of mediators that we know have really deep small business experience, and the cost of the mediation is usually shared between the parties. So that's where a cost comes in, and people can make a call on if they're happy to move to that point. So
we will definitely put a link to your website, probably up today, I guess, if we can do that on the Q&A, but also we will put it up on the recording for people to have a look at the work that your organisation's doing. So I know we'll have more questions, but Mike, again, thank you for joining us from Germany. But you heard what Adam Gilmour had to say there. So some of those things are really important about having a business plan and talking to the bank. You really need to have those fine points. Can you tell us a bit more about Export Finance Australia and how that could help our members?
Sure. So to Adam's points, you know, a lender is interested in how they're going to get their money back, right? So regardless of who that lender is, a little bit different viewpoint than an investor who you're, you know, taking on as an owner partner. They're going to take a longer term view on the company and its story, and you know, do they believe the story? For a lender, it's a much shorter term, right? So we want to know that the money that we're going to put into this company is able to be repaid. And so it's kind of the next level of detail, rather than just the market sizing and where's your niche within that market. We want to really focus in on the cash flows and can we believe those cash flows? And so information around contracts, what are you going to do? Who are you going to do it for? You know, do we feel comfortable that the customer that you're engaging with has both the ability and the desire to pay you? So are they a huge corporate, you know, in a tough country where you might not be able to get money out in some particular day due to market factors? And so lenders looking in and all those things and saying, okay, if we lent this company X amount of money for X period of time, is the company going to be able to repay that? And do we believe that the company is going to be solvent and be there through the course of this lend? And so it does come down to the cash flows and the assumptions around that. As Adam touched on, the banks are very interested in security, and that's not necessarily through any fault of their own. You know, over the previous how many years, banking regulation has moved to you know, more and more responsible lending, and the way you do that with banks is you know, you legislate to ensure that they have adequate capital reserves. And so the most capital efficient structure for a bank is a home loan, and so that's why they're very, very interested. I mean, you would do anything to continue to pay your mortgage. And so that's why it's the most secure form of lending, which is why it's probably the first piece of security that a bank will ask for. There are other lenders out there who have different focuses. Some will focus on equipment, others will focus on accounts receivables. And so, you know, if you've not had much luck with your bank, or you haven't got property to give your bank, or you don't want to give property to your bank, there are other people to talk to out there. My organization is one. I'm from an organization called Export Finance Australia. We're owned by the Commonwealth Government, and we exist to help companies that are going out into the world, either exporting directly or indirectly, or investing in you know, physical footprint overseas if the banks can't help.
And Mike, how do people reach out to you, and what's the first steps?
Well, I would encourage that anybody that is having a conversation, is internationally active, you know, having a conversation with their bank, and the bank can't help, they can reach out either directly to me or via you, you know, via our website, exportfinance.gov.au. First steps, you know, in a first discussion with me, I'll be trying to sort of go from up here. Tell me about the company. Tell me about your international operations. So whether that's actual operations physically overseas, or whether you're selling to someone overseas, or you're aspiring to sell to someone overseas. Tell me about your conversations with the bank. What sort of funding do you see a need for, and why have you been unsuccessful in your application with the bank? And then, you know, from there, that will give me a pretty good idea of what we're looking at, and hopefully give an initial thought around what an approach to resolving this problem might be. And then we would go into a much more thorough due diligence as we went along the process. And that's going to revolve around, you know, as I mentioned, the contract. You know, how much debt does this company have? Can it actually handle any more? What does the rest of the company's finances look like? So if we're going to fund into a specific contract or a specific group of contracts, does the company have enough money to make sure that that its employees are going to be paid?
So again, Mike, you're coming back to what we're talking about with having a plan. Any investor is going to want to look at what is the plan, where have you come from, and where are you going? What's the potential and what's the risks?
That's true. So it is, but it's also, you know, it's the detailed end of the plan, right? So there's the direction of the business. You know, if you're driving down the road, we want to make sure that that you're able to stop at the red light, or if somebody jumps out in front of you, right? So it really comes down to the details around how are you executing that plan.
Okay. And Alexandra, I guess in this COVID year, the crisis that we're going through has been, you know, it's all been upside down in so many ways, and people have been saying, you know, the crystal ball has broken. So how does the Ombudsman's office work with small business in particular about any issues around the COVID crisis?
Look, we listen to them, I think, is the most important thing. I think that's it's something small businesses constantly tell us, is that they don't feel that government listens to them. So we partner with peak bodies that represent small businesses. We've got a large number of them that we convene semi-regularly and say, what are the top issues that you guys are seeing? And that's really how we define and work out what we're going to work on. And then if we see some problems coming through our assistance function, we will call the relevant industry bodies and we'll say, hey, we're hearing a bit of this. Are your members saying the same thing? And is it something you'd like us to look at? So we're really careful not to step on any toes. We don't do the job of industry bodies. We don't, you know, advocate for specific business industries, but we do need that information so that we can do our job properly and help them advocate to government for their members. So that's really critical for us.
And I think quite often as business owners, it's good to have someone to be able to talk with and try and chart a path forward. That can be vitally important when you're, you know, so busy trying to run the business as it is, but there might be a roadblock ahead that you want to plan and prepare for. So to be able to ring you and your team, I'm sure that's a valuable insight.
Absolutely. And even just to understand how processes work. So we're working with a number of businesses at the moment who have specific requests in with government, and they're sort of calling and saying, well, what happens next? And we're able to help them unpick some of that complexity. And if they're sort of saying, oh, I haven't heard anything for a week, we're saying it's okay. A week in government land is not a long time. Just, you know, a little bit of patience and we'll probably get there. So that's really good too.
I don't think anyone is the Lone Ranger this year. You know, everyone's in the same boat. And so to be able to have a conversation to see, you know, am I doing all the best things that I can for my business? I think that's really important. And I've been out talking to our members, and I know Mark has as well, just to be a sounding board to say, you know, this is what we're seeing across industry around the country. And sometimes that's just the support mechanism that our members need. So now more than ever, it's great to be able to just pick up the phone and talk with people. I think it's really important. But Mike, at Export Finance, that must be a similar thing. What sort of things have you noticed with the COVID crisis, and how has Export Finance Australia had to react?
Great, thanks, Michael. Yeah, COVID has not really spared anybody. Everybody's been affected. We initially saw reports of companies saying that they were having trouble, you know, getting imports of raw materials, you know, predominantly from China or wherever it was, to bring stuff in to do what they needed to do. That very, very quickly morphed into not being able to export, obviously because air freight was grounded to a large extent, people not able to travel to go and do training or implementation of contracts. And you know, like everybody else, we saw a general kind of seizing of business. Now, the government has responded around late April through the provision of a $500 million exporter COVID support facility. So this was available for companies that were turning over at least 250,000 and were otherwise financially viable, so profitable in at least one of the previous 2 financial years, and were negatively impacted by COVID. Effectively, they are a relaxed set of credit criteria, so to help companies through the constrained trade or hibernation period, with funding to support their business activities. And this doesn't replace any of the other government support or the bank support facilities that are available. We sort of slot in on top of those, and we expect that you know, the company will be able to continue to trade through this COVID constrained period, and then be able to show us a path back to business as usual over a more extended period of time. So as we talked about before, you know, being able to see the ability to repay is really, really important to a lender. With COVID constraints, it's not that easy to demonstrate the ability to repay. And so, you know, we're here to support those companies that are constrained until they get to a point that they are able to repay. So seeing a lot of uptake in the international education space, in the tourism space, lots of manufacturers out there who have, you know, had constrained trade. So just across the board, we're seeing a lot of companies using this facility.
So there's plenty of support out there, which is great. So feel free again to reach out to any of us. And if you're looking for that sort of support or advice or guidance, just give us a holler and we can make those connections for you. But Mark, if we're talking about projects, I mean, that's a great way to start to try and access capital. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the APR intern program, where people can apply for a grant to get PhD students into their business. And the federal government has now increased that to 90% funding for that to happen. But if we're talking about projects in general, including AMGC projects, I guess one of the key drivers is capability and capacity that you'd be looking for in an application. What sort of things should people be trying to focus on in that? What would you be looking for?
Yeah, and just about every government grant, there is that criteria which covers that capability and capacity. So talk about your previous projects that you've done. So you've said, I've done this project before, I've got a team that can do it. The management team, the biographies for those management people, show an organisation chart. Mm-hmm. And also look at, make sure you consider risk management when you're looking at that capability and capacity criteria. But just about every government grant has that. That's one section of the assessment criteria that people like myself and people in government look for.
Yeah, and there's so many grants out there. There's a growing amount of grants coming online, which is just terrific. So the support is there. So I guess they're looking for commercial outcomes. But for everyone out there, for everyone listening though, Mark, what sort of, is it generally 50-50? Is it matched dollar for dollar? I know, you know, the Manufacturing Modernisation Fund has different scenarios, but what can people expect when they're applying for a government grant?
Yeah, generally 50-50, whether it be state or federal. But yeah, the MMF, Manufacturing Modernisation Fund, that was 25% from the government and 75% from the client when it was over 100,000 grants. So that's the only one that departed from that. Mainly they're 50-50. Okay.
And so if you're looking for a commercial outcome, I guess you're talking about the end of a project. So the last milestone. We talked earlier in one of the 10 ways was sales and marketing and getting your message out there, growing a marketplace. So the commercial outcomes are vitally important too. What sort of things would you be looking for if you're assessing a grant application?
The commercial outcomes, they should be have done their market research and they should be able to estimate what their sales are going to be for the first 5 years after the project. So I always look for that. It's hard to quantify, hard to verify, but at least if they've done their market research, they know what the market size is, they know what part of the market they want to attack or what sector, and they should be able to get an estimate out and just to give me confidence to give them that money.
Yeah, okay. No, good advice. We've got a question coming through, and please feel free to send any questions and I can ask on your behalf. But Alexandra, I might start with you on this one, which is I'm a small manufacturer. Where should I start with sorting my finances? It's not my strong suit. I'd like to grow, but I find striking the balance between my time and managing the business is a challenge. Now, I think that's a very common question, and you must get phone calls at the Ombudsman about the time frames and allocating resources. What do you think about that?
Look, I 100% hear that. We hear that a lot at the time. And I think, the reality is that people who are very good at running their business may not be great at managing the finance or doing whatever it is they're doing because they're focusing on what they do well. I know, if I was looking for a new home loan, I wouldn't go doing it for myself because I'm not great with numbers. So I would absolutely be getting an expert to do that for me. And so that's something we do say to people is that it's really important to develop a trusted relationship with your business advisors. They may be internal. For smaller businesses, they may be external. So these are your accountants, your bookkeepers, your finance brokers, those people that are experts in their field and are doing a really good job of them. It's important, we believe, to make sure that those advisors are appropriately registered and regulated. So if you don't have people already, I'd be suggesting that people go and look at CAANZ, CPA and IPA for appropriate accountants, the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers for bookkeepers, and the Commercial and Asset Finance Brokers Association for finance brokers.
I didn't even know there was an association for bookkeepers, Alexandra, so I've learned something new.
There sure is. There's one for everyone, I think. But those guys will really be able to help identify people who are in a proper professional standards kind of environment. They sign up to a code and they're appropriately regulated. So building those relationships, and then those are the people who can provide that expert advice for you.
Well, there you go. We've got some great panelists today. So have a look at some of those points that Alexandra's mentioned to us. We'll certainly put some more links for the recording on the YouTube channel. So remember that you can play this back as of tomorrow, and you can see all the previous webinars that we've been doing too around the 10 ways to succeed in Australian manufacturing. We've got another question here. This is from Rod Newton. Rod's up in with Laser Central in Queensland. And the question is for you, Mark. How novel do projects have to be eligible for funding? For example, we think we would benefit from investment in robots. So I would just touch on that first, Mark, by saying, thanks, Rob, for your question. It's good to hear from you. And I always say to our members that are looking at buying a robot, what do you want to use it for? And I think it's really important to, again, have a plan around what the technology you're going to use for, what's the technology roadmap. Certainly reach out to the universities, because quite often some of our great researchers have done all the hard work and they've purchased a particular robot for a particular need, and they can offer guidance and support on that too. But Mark, we have the research side of things into our applications too, don't we? What's your advice to Rob on something like that?
Yeah, Rob, that's a good question. The Manufacturing Modernisation Fund is designed to fund robotics in manufacturing. So those guidelines should be out before the end of the year. So you'll find out from AMGC, we'll send out a note to say that that fund's up and running. So that's very important there. AGVs is another area of robotics that I think will come into play in the next 5 years. But they did a survey the other day, the latest robotics and automation survey, and Australia's dropped from 29th to 35th in the world when it comes to implementation of robotics. So we are lagging. I think maybe because we don't have any robots being manufactured in Australia, we've got to import them. But I think if a company decided to manufacture a robot in Australia, I'd certainly get behind it from an AMGC perspective. But yeah, the best way to attack the robotics that you're looking for, I think, will be with the MMF, and that's got to make your business transformation such that you are going to be a lot more competitive globally and more competitive against imports, not against other laser people or laser manufacturing businesses in Australia, but against imports. And that's what you should really pump for in your MMF application, as the guidelines stand at the moment.
Yeah. And robotics and automation, it's all part of this industry 4.0, this digital transformation of manufacturing. It is an exciting time, and both Mark and I have been talking with our members, and we see the companies that do put these new technologies into their business, the companies grow. The skills are upgraded. They're looking for more staff because they've simplified their processes. They've improved the quality with the robotics and automation. So it certainly does have an impact on your business. And we've talked about this in earlier seminars, but plenty of information and case studies on the AMGC website. It's probably a good reminder to also have a look at the Manufacturing Academy. So that's where we were able to go around the country and speak with many industry leaders. And on Manufacturing Academy, they're sharing their information about how they're transforming their business today. So certainly recommend you get on board and have a look at that and interact with some of the leading minds in their field on that one. We've got more questions coming through, so keep sending them. This one is from Fisher, and he says, "Hi all, thanks for this webinar. I'm just starting as a researcher in Brisbane and the robotics field, and I'm trying to find my options within industry. Universities seem very slow in partnering with the industry and don't seem to know how to get involved. What's a good start to find industries that are open to researchers?" Now, I talked about APR intern earlier, Mark, but I know you've been busy at the various universities across Queensland, and there's certainly opportunities for industry to engage with our great minds in the research field. We're blessed in this country to have some of the best researchers in the world right here in Australia. So what would your advice be for Fisher around that sort of thing?
I'd get him to contact the new ARM hub, which has been developed, funded by the state government. And they're very much aligned with QUT's Robotic Research Institute as well. So I would go down that track. That'd be the best way in Brisbane to get into that robotics technology and network in that area. They have functions or events, etc. I'm actually speaking at one on the 17th of November, probably virtually like this. But although Queensland, we can get around. So yeah, that's what I would advise him to contact ARM and go from there. Yep.
And I guess the good thing about your organisation, Alexandra, is that it's not a robot that's going to pick up the phone. They can talk to a real person and get some guidance and advice. So they can email through to you or pick up the phone. What's the best way that people engage with your organisation?
Look, they usually pick up the phone. If they've got a dispute, they can lodge a dispute form on our website, and one of our team will call them back and just talk through those issues. But usually they'll pick up the phone if they've got specific questions, and that will come through to our call centre, which is staffed by small business experts. And then if they can't answer the question, they'll forward it through to us.
Yeah. Well, we've had 2 questions there today, and I think they should both connect with each other. So maybe Mark somehow will connect Fisher with Rob Newton. So let's see what we can do. Maybe work some magic. Another question here is, I have access to capital. So how can providers or manufacturers harness and therefore someone like me get the message out there that there is plenty in the well? So here's someone that's got access to capital and they want to meet manufacturers. Michael, you know, it's not always easy to connect the dollars to the need, right? But at Export Finance Australia, you're certainly engaged with most of the major banks and talking with investors right around the country. What do you think about that sort of thing?
So I think intermediation of capital is always a tricky question. It depends on what this person's investment thesis is. Do they look at specific types of companies that they want to invest in, a specific type of technology? Is it equity capital? Is it debt capital? I think there's not quite enough information to really definitively answer the question. Mm-hmm. But if people are looking for investments, there's a variety of pitch nights out there from different accelerators. That might specialize in tech or in fintech or in reg tech or whatever it is, and just get out there to some of these pitch nights and see what's out there in terms of companies seeking funds and hopefully find some opportunities.
Yeah. And Alexandra, I guess this is where your office becomes important, because if there's various investment groups out there looking to engage with industry, sometimes there might be issues or problems that might arise. And again, people can reach out to you and get some guidance.
Absolutely.
Do you have maybe a small case study around small business in particular and how small business engage with your organisation on a regular basis?
Look, I suppose the most frequent one-to-one interaction is with the assistance team. And so it's hard to sort of pick an individual case study because our team does such great work. I think one that came up recently was a lady who was running a business and the ATO had deemed her ineligible for JobKeeper. And our team worked with her, got some more information, wrote to the ATO a number of times, and ended up getting that decision reversed. So she's been able to be paid the last 6 months worth of JobKeeper payments, which has been an enormous benefit for her business, to be able to get that. So that's the kind of stuff. It doesn't happen all the time, but that's the kind of stuff our wonderful assistance team does on a daily basis.
Oh, that's really good to know. That's certainly been so much change this year for people to wrap their mind around. But again,
and it's complicated. Yeah.
I think it can be, but if you guys can help simplify that, I think that's just terrific. And I'm sure everyone out there would like to hear more of that. So on that theme, Peter Taylor says that applying for government grants, and I might throw this one to you, Mark, applying for government grants for some companies can be a very challenging and time-consuming process. How can the various government bodies writing the eligibility criteria focus more on the end user? And what additional role can the AMGC have in this process? Well, I know that you have already been looking at simplifying the application form, so that's a timely question. But I think, obviously you need certain information, but we do know that there are ways that various grants applications could be simplified, don't you think?
Yeah, I've been trying to give them advice on how to structure the scoring criteria, application processes. And, it's a big process. They've been given, a lot of money to give out, and there's a lot of processes they've got to go through. So we are attempting to help them with their guidelines, and we'll continue to do that. From our perspective, our core funding, our guidelines are fairly straightforward and easy to explain. They will be up on our website when the guidelines have been agreed with the government. And it will be a very simple process to, number one, put in an expression of interest. They'll ask a number of questions, and that will determine whether it goes to a stage 2. So it will be a fairly streamlined process, which they'll find rather easy for the end user to use. And there's always myself on the end of the phone to give them guidance if they need to ask particular questions. And that makes me think maybe I should write a how-to guide, I think, to all of these, to our projects in particular. Yeah,
you're just the man to do that. I think that would be a bestseller, I reckon, because you know that we get all those calls. So yeah, actually, that could be you could do that in your spare time.
Exactly. I could do one for MMF as well, and then Manufacturing Modernisation Fund. I could do one for the CRCP ones as well to a degree. So yeah, I've sort of had a lot of experience now with them, even doing the Moon to Mars one now as well. I'm on that selection committee. So that's another little committee that I'll be looking at projects on. So they vary. So Moon and Mars will be different from MMF, but different guidelines. But we will try. I will keep trying to make it easier for end users or grant recipients to write their applications. And
I think it's a good mission to have. I'd like to see that book. And on that, I didn't give any of our panelists any notice, but I do like to ask our groups about what books they might read or a good podcast you might be listening to. And for the benefit of our members out there, what's a go-to guide that you might look to? Is there an author that you often buy their book and look back on for leadership in business, or is it around the finance sector? And I'm sure we're all going to buy Mark's new book when that comes out next year. So looking forward to that one. But Michael, I might start with you. Is there a book that you recommend to people that they can pick up and read, or a certain podcast that might give some advice and guidance around access to capital and that sort of thing?
Michael, honestly, nothing comes to the top of my head. There's just such a big topic with a lot to wade through. I think really in terms of resources to give to people, the best thing you can give them is connection. And so, anybody that's out there listening, just please feel free to reach out to any of us here on this panel. And if I know for myself, and I'm sure for the rest of you, that if I'm not the right person to address the query, then I'll most certainly try and make an introduction to somebody who can.
Well, I think in Mark Peters' new book, you can look at writing the foreword for that and give some information and value in that new book, because I know it'll be a bestseller. We know our members are looking for that sort of expert advice and guidance. So I think we could be on a winner here. But Alexandra, is there a podcast you listen to? Is there a book that you reach out to? One of our
Shall
guys
we-
said that they like
Yeah,
to.
I'm going to be absolutely shameless and put in a plug for a piece of work that our office has done. So I'm sorry, but it's freely available. We created a business funding guide and a rider to that, which is the Fits Me guide, which gives small businesses and their trusted advisors some tips and tricks in how to get finance fit before you go and make these applications. So the Fits Me guide, I think it's 8 pages. It's not very long. There's some graphics in there, but it gives small businesses really simple tricks like getting your finances in order, splitting your personal from business finances, because we know a lot of people merge those, getting a proper business plan in place so that by the time you go to seek finance, you're as ready as you possibly can be and you give yourself the best possible chance of getting that finance without too many headaches. So I know you've got a link to that, and I'd encourage people to have a little look at that.
This is good. I can see the back cover of the book writing up now already. So Fisher's already replied and he says, yes, please. A how-to guide would be great. I'll send in a few emails for further info. And if I can help from the university side, I would be happy to help. So looks like this book's come together, Mark. So I know you're planning to have a Christmas break, but it might be pen and paper all the way, mate.
I always wanted to be an author. My partner's an author, so maybe I can compete with her now.
This is good. Well, everyone is talking about manufacturing this year. That's the transformation that we're seeing. There's so much going on in our sector right now, so much so that we don't call it a sector anymore. We say that manufacturing is a nation's capability. What are we capable of producing and making, and what can we export to the world and add value? Ultimately creating local jobs and higher paying, higher skilled jobs that can really drive our country forward and put Australia out in the global marketplace like never before. So you've had some great panelists here today, and I'm so glad they could join us. We've got some slides to throw up just to recap on what we've been talking about today, and looking forward to the following seminars where we'll talk more about the 10 ways to succeed in Australian manufacturing. So certainly looking forward to more speakers to come on board. Remember that you can see all of this on the YouTube channel. There's some great content on there. But today we've talked about fixing your business accounts and separating your personal and business finances. That's quite often what we see in small business and family business in particular. Prepare or update your business plan. I think that's vitally important. And there are programs out there like the Entrepreneurs Program that you can engage with and get financial support to get business planners and help you in your business. Access your credit worthiness and check your personal and business credit rating. You can do that through the tax portal, and again, all this information is available in the report. Find the right funding for your business. There's flow charts and funding matrices out there, and there's more detail in the report about this to help you choose the most appropriate funding. And of course, seeking advice. Take the opportunity to learn firsthand how to better structure investment proposals. And we heard Adam Gilmour talking about that early on around getting the business plan in place, but it's an ongoing plan, isn't it? Because our business keeps changing every day. And so it's important to seek advice and reach out to wherever you can to get that guidance and support. So use the online resources to help decide which grant is appropriate. We heard Mark talk about the various grants that are available, and we both know there's many more to come. So it's a good time to be in manufacturing. Keep your records up to date. Continually update records to minimise the work required when writing an application. So of course, you know, the more grants that you can apply for and the more that you write, it'll become easier. As I said earlier, the people that receive those grants will expect your applications coming through, and they will offer support and guidance as well, because there's plenty of support mechanisms out there. And as far as building local capabilities and boosting manufacturing, there's never been a better time. So feel free to reach out. And finally, they were saying about being patient. And we did talk about that. So take the time to consider the costs and benefits of writing a given application. And if they apply, invest adequate time and make it count. So that's really important. Of course, become a member of AMGC. It's completely free. We're growing this fantastic network all over the country. Companies big and small engaging with us and sharing our research, looking at how they can transform their business today and build the business for tomorrow. It's certainly an exciting time. It's an unusual time. We've never seen it before, have we? But there is support out there. There is guidance. I talked about the Manufacturing Academy. There's business leaders on that platform that are sharing their knowledge. they're transforming their business as we speak. And we're talking about small business to very large companies. So no matter where you fit into the ecosystem, have a look at Manufacturing Academy, because I know that it can help you. And we will keep evolving that platform. We're going to be adding other learning modules. So please log in and learn and have a look at that. And I certainly welcome your feedback. If you've got some points that you want to add, or perhaps you want to be involved, reach out and let's see how we can work together. Now, finally, the COVID Manufacturer Response Register. We mentioned last week that that's been updated and upgraded. So again, have a look at that platform. If you're looking for medical PPE in your business, there's manufacturers on there that can help you. If you are a manufacturer of PPE and other products, get on there, and for free, you can put your resources and capabilities on there for the general public to have a look. It's open to everyone to get involved with. So again, here's the 10 Ways report. Today we've talked about access to capital, and there's much more to come. So look forward to catching up with all of you again next week. And thank you for joining us today, and thanks to our panelists. All the best.